And that way we can post this. I know it's a busy time of the year for a lot of people, and hard to get out. So like I said, we'll record the 2 webinars that we're planning to host, focused on dry beans, both of them focused on pest management, trying to get some, I guess, real-time info out to producers and those working with producers to help them manage insects and disease and other pests in their dry beans. So welcome to Beans for Lunch webinar series. As I just mentioned, we're going to have 2 webinars. We have one today and then another one in roughly about a month that will be focused on disease management. We've set up these webinars to basically hear briefly from our kind of experts in the field and then open it up for questions if anybody has questions or discussion. So it won't be a long presentation. And if you have any questions, hopefully there'll be plenty of time for that. The webinar today is brought to you by the University of Vermont Extension. Ivy Krasinski, myself, Heather Darby, and Susan Brulette joining us today. And then also Cornell University. And we have Kristen Loria joining us from the road. Looks like she's headed out to the field. The webinars are generously funded through a USDA SARE grant and also a USDA Organic Research and Education grant. So we do have some CCA credits available, 1 IPM credit per webinar, and we'll put up the QR code following the presentation today. So with that, I'm going to introduce Clark Moore. He's a CCA with the Western New York Crop Management Association. And thanks, Clark. I'm sure you're super busy. And we appreciate your time today. I see Ivy put a little pop-up poll up. So if you can take a second and answer that, that would be great. But Clark, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to you. And I believe Ivy is running the slides for you.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And hope everybody's having a decent growing season so far. I know there's been some challenges early and everything seemed that it was going to go fast. And then it got wet and cold and then super hot here. So I'm going to talk about insects and some of the things been seen in the field coming in early here and what we may be looking for in dry beans in the first part of the growing season here, with some pictures and some other options going on here. Okay, if we go on to the next slide. Yeah, so early on at planting, early germination, some of the critters we're looking at, and may see coming in are, yeah, if we can go back a couple more right there. Especially if you don't have treated seed, there's going to be some very common things to see. Seed corn maggots, seeing them in some untreated soybeans and untreated corn this season already. They're out there and active. You may be seeing wireworms, cutworms, starting to see them around in corn. Last week, increasing this week, showing up in some of the corn fields. I haven't seen any in soybeans or dry beans yet. I know the net counts are showing up higher in various areas. So especially if you got cover crops that were planted before, or come planting beans after triticale that was harvested early, might be a chance of seeing some cutworms coming in or having them show up very soon here. White grub's another one with the cover crops. If you got heavy grass in there or plant no-till, that could be an issue early on. Was doing some populations of my first dry beans yesterday. The farthest along I've seen are just early first trifolia opening up. They've got full cotyledons. So that's about the stage I've seen. There might be some earlier stuff out there. But especially with the organic or in a cover crop where we get heavy grass, any of these insects here could be an issue. Definitely don't have the cutworm pressure this year that we had last year around so far. Hopefully we don't see that.
Mark, why do you think that is? Just less storms, or I thought we might have worse cutworm pressure this year because, mild winter and like faster movement of the populations, but you're not seeing that then.
Not seeing that. Did see the other day army worms and wheat and triticale for grain. And I think those must have blown in the week before.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of army worm to the north towards the lake, Genesee, Orleans, Niagara counties. This was in about the middle of Livingston County. All the worms were on the anthers, and they all appeared to be parasitized and dead. I couldn't find any live ones, but there was easily find 2 to 3 in a 4 square foot area that were dried up and dead. But that seemed a little unique for this year. I thought we'd see more cutworm again too, especially with all the cover crops that are going in now.
Yeah.
More and more cover crops. I'm not sure. We've been very aggressive about going in early and killing the cover crop with Roundup and a mix with Sharpen, which gave us an easy rotation back into corn or soybeans with the Sharpen. You can't use that for dry beans or things like that. But we got a quick kill on the cover crop, which may have helped by doing that early on. That there wasn't as attractive an area to put those land and put the eggs in. But yeah, you would think with the mild winter that it would be worse too, but you just haven't been seeing the
Yeah.
counts that are out there.
Yeah.
And even what we are seeing, there's very minimal damage. It isn't it'll be 1 or 2 plants and that's it. And very small worms.
So for the cutworms, I also saw a little bit of cutworm damage in corn. They impact the beans too. That's something I guess I haven't seen much of. Can it be really
Occasionally kind of potentially there's a potential to have cutworms in there. It seems to be more in the Midwest or some of the like Ohio and stuff. Some of the research they were showing cutworms could be an issue, even in beans. So
Yep. Okay.
all right, we can go on to the next one. Yeah. Again, I looked at my first dry beans yesterday. Didn't see flea beetles in those, but every other crop this spring so far had high flea beetle pressure. There's a tiny little black beetle. It'll jump around really fast. They really like it when it's hot and dry. We're seeing a lot of them this week in like pumpkins, cold crops. You'll see a lot of them. They'll do a damage to small corn and soybeans too. It'll be that surface feeding or pitting on the cotyledon, or the first as the trolley foliate starts to come out, and they're going to be that little black dot that's hopping around all over the place real quick. Some circumstances they can do a lot of damage quickly, especially if you got wet areas where your stand is thin or poor. That can be an issue really early on in the growth development of that crop. But we've seen a lot of flea beetle all over this year, more than in the past couple of years. Depending on the pressure in the crop, it could warrant treatment. And the slide on the right is very typical flea beetle damage. It won't chew all the way through the tissue, but it eats that top meat or top tissue off the leaf. And very tiny specks where it eats. It's different from some of the other insects we'll show. All right, we can go on to the next one. There we go. Um, Probably one of the biggest, second biggest flea beetle and slugs have been very prevalent this year. And I've seen it Ohio, Pennsylvania, all over the Northeast. It seems to be more of an issue this year. Um, they've been in the alfalfa. You spray the alfalfa. They've been pushing out of those edges. If there's strips into the corn or into the soybeans. If you again where you have high residue, whether it's corn stalks, cover crop that's been burned down, um, can tend to be areas where you're going to see more slugs. Um, we've had multiple areas or regions this year that we've gone in with treatments to try and handle deal with the slugs, and there's been quite a few soybean fields that have been replanted. Um,
Are
I
these
guess it's a
in
wait and
high
see.
residue, like high residue fields, Clark, or just any field?
High residue fields, corn stalks, cover
Okay,
crop. Um,
yeah.
I think they've been moving out at times out of the alfalfa.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
Over to definitely seen where 10 to feet 12 feet into a cornfield after we've sprayed for alfalfa weevil, slug damage. Um, so your normal insecticides that like your your pyrethroids and such, they aren't going to affect the slugs because the slug isn't an insect. So it can pass that through its system. So they may not like it and they moved out into the other, but yeah, anywhere you got residue or some moisture there, you could see that damage. You aren't going to see them in the day; they're going to come out at night, but it's pretty much a shredding pattern to the leaf. They can tear it up pretty good, and even the cotyledons and the young germinating seed, they can feed on that and on that stem as it's coming out. Um, Especially on the small plants, if you've got a lot of slugs, they can be pretty devastating fast. Um, Problem with Sluggo and some of the other um, slug materials is I'm pretty questionable how well they work. I guess I'm careful how I say that, but I think it's as much from my experience, it's kind of a band-aid. We feel better putting something out for them and try to reduce it. I mean, especially in high populations, they're doing so much damage. A lot of times, it probably is best off going back in and replanting with severe slug infestations as early as you can, and hopefully they're passing through where it gets dry enough that with that replant we can get past that and get the plants growing faster. Most of the time they'll outgrow it, but there's sometimes it's enough that it's going to take those plants down. Or if you get the germinating seed and they feed on that, it's not going to come through at all. But very unique thing this year that had to have the much pressures we're having. And well, I was on one webinar from Ohio over the winter, and they were talking about slugs, and they said that the treatments we have on the corn seed and such, um, the slugs can it just passes through their system, but the predators that feed on the slugs are insects, and they are affected by that seed coating insecticide treatment. So I thought that was kind of interesting that you know we're reducing insecticide and minimum doses and placement, but we're actually maybe creating more of a slug issue or a rising cause of slug issue, and it may not be the cover crops as the zone till practices, but other issues that are causing an increase in slug damage and pressure. So we can go on to the next slide. So aphids, we've seen aphids since the beginning of April, and they've been slowly increasing in alfalfa every week since then. We're on the verge, probably this week, if not this week, next week, we'll be spraying alfalfa in certain areas strictly for aphid control. Where you got aphids, you're very likely to see these good guys, which you're going to see in the beans very early on too, with any bugs that are out there. The lady beetle, but um, so the eggs are the little yellow spots you may see on the underneath of the leaf, and then the pupas and the larvae are actually good guys. So they're a little more reddish or orangish than the Mexican bean beetle, which we'll have a slide of in a little bit. But yeah, you want to. It's good to be familiar with what a ladybug beetle young are versus some of the Mexican bean beetle and such, because we could think we have a bad insect out there when we actually got one that's taking care of some of the things we want to take care of. Um, so those larvae are often confused or look like they might be something bad, but they're actually something good. They're gonna feed on the aphids, and they're good predators on quite a few things. But I wouldn't be surprised if early on here on the young beans we're going to start seeing aphids from what I've seen the last few weeks on other crops. That's going to be something to be on the lookout for. Next slide, please. Uh, Here I've got a couple different pictures. On the left, I've got a couple leaf hoppers. So they're going to be kind of triangular. There's going to be a couple different colors. They're going to hop around. So they're going to pierce into the plant and suck the juices out. And then they do the bottom one on the left is kind of the scarring they can do. Sometimes they'll cause some yellowing within the leaf, like in a V shape when they're injecting the digestive juices in. Sometimes some can transmit viruses also. Leaf hoppers have just started to increase in alfalfa right now. They blow up with the storms. We could see those anytime coming into beans too. Especially if you've got alfalfa nearby and it gets treated, those that survive are going to move off into something else for a few days and may end up showing up in your bean field. And start feasting there too. On the right, probably a little early right now. If we get in another heat spell and it stays really dry, we might start seeing mites fairly early. I am seeing grass start to brown up on the edges of the road, which is usually a good indication that we'll start looking for mites even early on in beans and soybeans. You'll get a bronzing or kind of a metallic look to the leaf, especially in on high ground, gravel spots in the field. That's a good indication that maybe you should start looking to see if there's any mites there. They'll curl at the bottom right. They'll curl the leaf almost like you pulled the petiole in and puckered that leaf. Generally, I'd say it's usually going to be another couple of weeks. Once we're in July, is usually more the potential for mites, but you never know. Usually, you look on the underneath for that with a magnifying glass, and they'll show up pretty easily. But you can't see them real good without a handheld magnifying glass to see them. But they show up very clearly when you look at the underneath of the leaf there. Sometimes if you've sprayed and haven't rinsed out good or thought you have with a sprayer and go in and do a spray, if you've got any dicamba left in that tank or breaks loose, you can get that same sort of look, that puckering. But usually there'll be a pattern to that you can relate back to, okay, that must be the sprayer. Normally that'll be on a headland or where you turn around the first time or two in a field. It'll be a little broader area. Mites usually are going to come in a patch, usually a high spot first or on a edge near road ditch where the grass is dried up. And they're just looking for something green to feed on. Okay, next slide, please. This is a nice chart or kind of a general schedule out of Michigan that kind of shows that some of the different insects in they can affect dry beans, snap beans, and their general timing. And how they overwinter or where they are before they come in to the area. And just a kind of a nice cheat sheet if you're looking on your own, or we'll use it for our technicians and scouts too, to have an idea what to be looking for when. And it's always subject to change within a couple weeks of what the general timings are, depending on the season and what the winters were like. But so at this point, we're basically at that stage where you may be dealing with sea corn maggot, the slugs, the white grubs. Aphids could be any time now. I very seldom see any green clover worm in the dry beans. Bean beetle, we're almost at time we could be seeing some of that coming in, and we definitely have leaf hoppers that are in the area now. So bean beetle and spider mite will be showing up probably within 2 weeks. Somebody's gonna be seeing some of that around, or some initial pressure coming into that. And then later on, we may see the cutworm, the corn borer, western cutworm, the corn borer, stink bugs. Most of these, interestingly, are your leaf hopper, your spider mites, your thrips, stink bug are all piercing type, so they're going to leave a scarring in there, or cause some yellowing within that plant, and could have some curling there. But that's a good sheet out of Michigan State that gives you kind of a general idea if you're scouting your own or when to be looking for certain things. We go on to the next one, please. Okay, this is probably one of the most common things everybody's dealing with, or Mexican bean beetle. So up in the top right, it's got a picture of the eggs, the pupae and the larva. So kind of similar shape to the ladybug. Shape-wise, different color patterns. So that's one thing to pay attention to, or bring up on your phone so you can take a look or take a picture and compare it later on when you get out of the field to know if you're dealing with a bean beetle or if it's a ladybug that you don't need to worry about at this point. The eggs are usually going to be on the bottom of the leaf, and then a lot of times you're going to see the little yellow spike guys sitting there walking around or feeding. Once you start getting to higher populations, you'll have the adults and your yellow larvae, as well as the eggs out there. The bean beetle is going to the larvae are going to tend to feed more on the bottom of the leaf with that scarring, and the adults will tend to be more on the top. They're going to feed fast and really thrash them, but they'll leave your inner skeletal tissue will still be there. So a little different than slug that's going to eat all the way through it. You're going to have that inner membrane still there. When you start seeing some of that in some of the plants, you're probably a good time to start looking to find the larvae or the eggs. May see a couple of adults around, but it's a good sign that if it's on the underneath side that you got some bean beetle coming in. I think bean beetle is always a tricky one to know when the threshold is. I mean, you can have a lot of damage that isn't economical early on. Once you start having pods set, then I think you got to be a lot more aggressive in what you're willing to tolerate and the numbers that are out there. But early on, when the plants are going fast, you can see a lot of damage, but it's not necessarily something that you need to treat right away, depending on the size of the plant. But once you start getting into pod development, pod set, you don't want that feeding and an injury getting onto on that pod and the marketable piece that you want of that crop. Going to look like a ladybug, except they're going to be a little more tan, about the same shape. All right, we can go into the next one. Insecticides, a lot of the insecticides for the different bugs are across the board. I mean, a lot of pyrethroids and stuff are fit a lot, most of the categories of insects. Cornell recommends is a good source of information. Found the other day, New England Dry Bean Insect Control. If you type that in, I've got a link on one of the next slides. It's got a lot of good information on some of the insecticides that are available. It breaks it out into those that are organic and non-organic. It has indicators whether there's a toxicity and the level of toxicity to bees. It'll have the active ingredient name, your rates, your pre-harvest intervals, your reentry interval. It's a nice cheat sheet if you're looking to see what might be available to treat different chemicals to treat different bugs, and what you're looking at for pre-harvest intervals or safety to bees and such. And with that active ingredient name on there, if you're looking at a proprietary product from one of the retailers you're buying from, or looking at a commercial product from one of the main manufacturers and comparing price or active ingredient, you can tell by the active ingredient if you're looking at the same material, even if the rates are different. Some quick information and a good way to look at, or if you're discussing it with your consultant or with a retailer to purchase some material. It's all summed up on that sheet. Very nice. There's like 10 pages of stuff and it lists each of the insects. Some of that sheet also, or booklet also, identifies products that are organic, which is nice. Way to find out on those too. A couple of the common organic products are Nemix and Pyganic. Another source that we've tried some stuff that is organic certified. We've been using commercial for conventional and organic, are some products from Rovenza Next. They have a lot of them are citric extract products. They work as insecticides and fungicides. From what we've seen, we've used a fungicide, and I've had a wheat and for white mold, and talked to a couple of growers have used some for insecticide. There appears to be some real interesting effects of these, and they do work from what we've seen. We've just used them this past year in the fall, and I've used some in the spring and some wheat. FS seems to be the main ones that have been playing in this game with these products. They did open it up to the other retailers this year. That some have product. I know there was a shortage on manufacturing, so not everybody may have everything at this point. The biggest thing I'd say with these, I'm on a learning curve, and everybody at Western New York's on a learning curve with this. I would have whoever your retailer, whoever you're talking to, talk to the reps from Rovenza Next. A lot of these products they want used in combination to be most effective. If you use the insecticide without what's being called an adjuvant, it may not work as well. So it's a little complicated and confusing what you want to put together. But if you have the right combination for what you're targeting, they seem to be very effective. If you use the one without the other proper thing in the mix, it doesn't seem to work as well. But when we've done it, talked to the rep and used what they've done, it has some pretty interesting performance. And seems to be very economical as an option to some of the other organic materials, or even to some of the commercial conventional materials as insecticides and fungicides. So not a plug on that, but just another source that there's not a lot of information out on there yet. But from what we're seeing, it may be something to consider. All right, if we go on to the next slide, that's a link to the New England Dry Bean insect control sheet. So I don't know if I have to take a picture of that, or if they're going to have the slides out there later. But that's a good source to look at. That's a very nice package of information in a summary form for insecticides, whether it's organic or conventional. So So that's about what I have for early season stuff we'd be looking at this point. You know, by the time we get to the next one, we're probably definitely going to be looking at mites, stink bugs, things like that. And we can talk about what's out there at that point, the pressure and such. So, and if there's questions or whenever we're taking questions, I'll be available for that.
Okay. All right. All right. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Wondering if we can get that resource in the chat, Ivy, that's kind of scouting chart. That was really nice. Thanks for sending. Oh, sure, we did it. And the New England Vegetable Guide. Both those things are really great resources. So Ivy's got them in the chat there. Any questions for Clark? For a few minutes. While people are getting their questions together, Clark, I had one. How often are you out scouting? Do you go, what would you recommend for a producer as far as timing, etc.?
Usually go out and we'll do a population count about this time once they get up enough to do that, to see what we have, do evaluation of the stand. A lot of times early like that, we can look for flea beetles. Might have some aphids or coming in there, white flies. Have had issues with white flies and organic beans before. It's been heavy mustard and lamb's quarter pressure in those fields. But don't see much on white flies and any of the stuff I was researching, but we've had issues with them. And they did some significant damage in the beans, and it's strictly in the organic ones. Scouting wise, once you get through that initial population count, get it that first trifoliate, we'll be back in probably. I usually wait about 2 weeks, take a look at them again. Once we get closer to budding blossom, going to be in there for probably 2 to 3 weeks in a row, checking out what's there. I got the advantage of looking at snap beans too, so I'm seeing what's going on there and in the soybeans. So once we see stuff going in there, we're also know when we got to be going back into the others. But I'd say minimum of every 2 weeks, taking a look at them. Once you start getting those beans setting, probably every week. That's about when those bean beetles start coming in, and they can explode pretty fast. It's amazing how much damage they can do on a big plant and move right to those bean pods. And that's probably economically, that's probably the biggest time to be checking on at least every 7 to 10 days if you start seeing pressure.
So with the sorry, I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to ask another one. But with the bean beetle, what's your threshold to treat? Or do you have one?
I've kind of gone by experience. I found some stuff the other day that said in the vegetative phase, around 30 to 35% damage to the foliage. Once we start flowering and get into pod set, that drops down to around 15% damage is enough to trigger an economic threshold. So big thing with the bean beetle too is you may have them in one field, but you may not have them in an adjacent field or down the road in another field. So it's on an individual basis. And but definitely when you get when you start getting 1-2 inch pods, or you get your full 3-4 inch pods starting to fill, that threshold goes way down. If you start seeing larvae on the bean pod, you want to be in there cleaning that up. And
Okay, that's good advice. I see Kristen asked, do you know what the geographic range is of the bean beetle? Is it all over the Northeast?
yeah, Northeast, Ohio, everywhere seems to have them. Um, they aren't, you aren't, the pressure is kind of spot like Japanese beetle. It's going to be everywhere. You're always going to have Japanese beetles in the fields. You don't seem to necessarily find bean beetles in everybody's area. Um, so whether they've blown in or how they get transmitted in there, they like certain areas. Definitely where you have a rotation of snap beans, dry beans, and such. Um, you got more likelihood of having bean beetles in there, especially area history of dry beans. There seems to be more bean beetles. I've got fields every year that the dry beans, we have dry bean, Mexican bean beetle pressure. Doesn't matter if they about 3 years, 5 years out, when it goes back to dry beans, we know we're going to have Mexican bean beetles in there.
Yeah, we haven't seen too much up here, in our neck of the woods, but, they are around. They don't
Mhm.
seem to cause a lot of damage yet. But we also don't have, we haven't in the past had a high population of soybean production or snap beans or dry beans, but now that soybeans are really taking off, could be bringing more pests, I guess, as
Mhm.
usual.
Yeah, I think the leaf hoppers and mites are probably more broadly common insect that you're going to see probably, if
Yeah,
especially mites if it's hot and dry. Could be anywhere. But,
yeah, I feel like the pest that I see most people treat for up here is leaf hoppers or aphids.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think Mexican bean beetle gets a lot of talk because it looks so horrific, the damage, because
yeah,
they shred the leaves so. But you can, when it's vegetative, you can have a lot of that and it's not affecting anything. But yeah, if you've got that pressure and you get the pods, um,
yeah.
they'll do a lot of damage. And
Good. Are there any other questions for Clark while we have him? So our goal was to not keep folks on forever, but get some information and give people the opportunity to ask any questions they might have. So please feel free to get your question answered. If you haven't been out scouting and your beans are up, sounds like today's the day to get out there, get looking around. If you need your CCA credits, it's coming up on the screen. Can you put that in full screen mode, maybe, Ivy? And yeah, we'll wait another minute here
I,
and
I, it's Susan, and I would put it in that mode if I knew how.
oh well, it's Ivy, are you showing it or Susan?
No,
I was
there it is. I'm showing
okay.
it. I got
I
it.
was trying to open it just as Susan did.
Okay, all
Sorry.
right.
Clark, I have a question,
Hey, well,
if no one else is jumping in. Yeah, so we might be past that point for this year, but for those early, sort of seedling pests, the wireworms, the seed corn maggot, that sort of thing, what do you recommend to growers, for trying to avoid, we've seen pretty substantial stand loss from year to year sometimes. Curious what you recommend in terms of like planting or looking for certain conditions, especially for those of us that are organic or not using seed treatment. Curious your thought.
Yeah, if you're not using seed treatments, it gets a little tougher. And probably if you can get the sod killed in the fall. Cover crop, they're gonna be attracted to that. Those grasses are gonna be attracted to that to lay the eggs in. You know that green mass there is what they like. If you do have a cover crop, the sooner you can get that killed down and dried down, the better. The longer green closer to when you're going to plant, I think that increases the numbers or chance of having damage there. And I don't know or haven't found any myself. I don't know of any organic seed treatments or over the tops you can put on. I mean, it'd have to be something that's placed around that seed or near that seed to have an effect. If you're spraying something over the top, I don't think that's going to get to them because they're going to be in the ground. But,
Yeah, we just tried a spinosad seed treatment this year on soybeans. We haven't, and on corn. We haven't processed the data yet. We did have a pretty heavy injury of maggot, grubs, wireworm, just because it was so cold. I think things were moving slow. So we'll be able to share how that worked out here, hopefully sometime soon.
and it tends to, it seems to see a lot, especially where you got high organic matter in the soil,
Yeah,
or the cover crop, or if you've got pack manure that's been put down on a field, with all that straw, that they like that debris or the high organic matter soils, that definitely will. And even especially near a wood line, even with untreated seed, you may see it heavier right along the woods or where it's shaded and cooler. And as you get into the opening of the field, you may not see as much of that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough one for organic and such.
Yeah. Well, especially this year and I guess last year too, where things stay cool. They're supposed to be warm enough in June when people are planting or
Yeah.
end of May. Charlie, I see you have a question. Do you want to mute yourself
Yes,
if you're not
I do
unmuted?
about
Oh, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
organic production. I grow, my partner and I grow both conventional and organic fields. And we use treated seed on the conventional, and that works well. But we have a big problem with leaf hoppers on the organic beans. And especially a lot of the older time bean varieties, heirloom varieties, they just really hammer the plants. I mean, we use organic spray, and that seems to slow them down a little, but in some years, it's still a big problem. Enough so that we've pretty much given up growing any old-time bean varieties and only stick to modern varieties like, black and pinto and, maybe cannellini, which seem to outgrow the problem. But the older varieties just get so stunted that yields are terrible. And in fact, we've cut back organic acreage because of it. But with, we do our own seed treatment because we use a lot of old time varieties where you can't get treated seed, and using Cruiser is very effective. Eliminates the problem. So we don't really have any post planting insecticides required. Seems to give pretty well season long control. I just wondered if you had any suggestions on the organic.
Yeah, the organic, that Reventech Next company. I'm very interested in those products. I think they're worth looking at. For like leaf hopper control and that, could be a good option. It's they seem to be working from what we've seen. Especially where you can't put the seed treatment on or can't get them treated. It may be a decent option for over the top control. And they are certified organically when you're using the right combination. It's a matter of timing and dosage and which mixes. They tend to have 2 or 3 different mixes depending when you want to put them on. It also works with white mold control. as well as insecticide control, depending on how you mix those up. But that would be something I think would be worth looking into and trying. Whether you, it's hard to split a field because you don't want, but trying on a field versus not on a field or whatever. And they're fairly economical, which is the nice thing about them.
No, that's
When
good.
you're looking at those combinations, but it's I think that's definitely worth looking into as another option to the Pyganic and the Thimetnos and
How effective is that Nemex product that was listed earlier? I've never used that.
we used that on some Mexican bean beetles last year. And that worked quite well. We ended up coming in with 2 applications. It was really heavy pressure. But we got them young and had to come in a second time because there was another flush. But that cleaned them up fairly well.
Okay.
I think we did a combination of the Nemex and the Pyganic. We actually found a custom sprayer that was willing to do it. They had a problem with the first shot. However, they mixed it. It turned to cottage cheese on them in the tank.
Hmm.
So they had to start over again. So I guess that would be a warning thing, or jar test it first and make sure. Yeah, because they had a bad reaction with that. The other products that we tried, the citric acid extracts, we haven't had any issues, mixing issues with those. And they can be put with other conventional chemistry too, if somebody's looking at using it that way. They seem to mix all right. But yeah, the Nemex and the Pyganic, we did have an issue, and I think it was just strictly the mixing order when things went in and how with how much water. But you know, it's never fun when you end up with a mess in the sprayer and have to clean it out and lose all that product that you paid for. But that would be one warning with those that if you haven't had experience with them, that it could be an issue. And making sure what you're putting in there, whether if you're putting something else in there too, that it's gonna they're gonna be compatible. Doing a jar test first.
Okay.
Charlie, I was gonna say, I can't find it handy, but we have looked at a lot of older varieties and their susceptibility to leafhoppers, because that's something that we noticed as well over the years when we were trialing varieties, is that some seem to be far, far more susceptible than others. So if you tell me your email, I'll try to send that to you, because some of it might, could help to have varieties that have, I don't want to say they have resistance, but I think they're airier for them. And so we've made these observations in our variety trials where there's 20, 30 varieties growing, and you can just see the leaf hoppers attacking certain varieties way more than others, found to maybe not be quite as susceptible.
Okay. We've certainly noticed that too. I mean, probably the only one that
Yeah.
does well. We've had pretty good luck with yellow eye beans. They seem more
Yeah,
tolerant leafhoppers. But
yeah,
things like Calypso or sulfur beans just get hammered. Jacob's
Yeah.
cattle has a lot of problems. We
Yeah.
grow a lot of heirloom varieties. That's our specialty. And
yeah,
organic is very tough. As I said, to the point where we've
Yes.
pretty much given up growing heirloom beans organically.
yeah. Somebody was asking if there's any trial data to look at for pre-vam. We haven't done anything with it. I don't think. Have you guys, Kristen? She's frozen. But definitely seems like something we need to. We don't, Charlie, we don't have the major, shouldn't knock on wood, but we haven't had the huge pest issues like you guys are talking about. We do get leaf hoppers you know, in years where we just have really high levels of leaf hoppers, but most of our growers haven't necessarily had to spray, maybe 1 out of 10 years. So
Really?
I think just we're in a different part of just less pressure too, because I think we don't grow as many beans, you know, so we don't have that same buildup or just even attraction. So,
Well, we have a lot of hay fields in our area in
okay.
southern Maine. And after they cut the hay,
Yeah,
you know, the leaf hoppers really seem to
yeah,
explode on the beans.
yeah, yep,
Yeah, that's a big trigger when
right.
the cuttings come off, they're looking for
Yeah,
someplace
because
to
they'll,
go.
sort of,
Yeah.
yep. All
Okay.
right.
Well, nothing's easy. Just thought I'd ask.
No, it's great. Well, and it also gives us stuff that we need to look at to some of the new insecticide fungicides that Clark was talking about. We should evaluate. It's always difficult because you never know if you're going to get leaf hoppers or not, at least up here. So we can have a big experiment and then get nothing. But sounds like they're more broad spectrum, so something we can definitely put on our to-do list. Charlie, somebody's asking you how often you lime.
Well, when we need it,
Depends.
but you know,
Yeah,
probably every several years we'll put on a ton an acre. You try to keep the pH well above 6. I mean, I've read that it's better to have it above 6.5 if you're for organic production. Yeah, we went into an old rundown hayfield a couple of years ago and put on 2 tons per acre. And that got the pH up to the low 6s anyway. But beans like lime from what I've seen.
yeah. Yep.
I see another question.
All right.
Calcium and CEC should be,
Yeah. Better than 65%. I think they're talking about the base saturation levels should be 65%.
well, I guess I'm not that familiar. I mean, we've often used high mag limestone just because that's what we can get. And our fields always test very high in magnesium, maybe. I'm not
Yeah.
sure whether that's good or bad, but that's.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we're getting close to 1 o'clock. And
Hey, Heather, did you see that question
yeah,
from
I
Rob?
think we appreciate could come. Yep.
There was a question from Rob. Is there any
Yes,
Cornell
we
trial
kind of
data?
Yeah,
Oh, you guys covered
we
that.
answered
Sorry.
it.
Sorry.
Yep. No problem. The answer was no. but we know we need to look at these new sites. Okay. All right. Whoop, see one more thing here. All right. Well, people are chiming in. We will meet again in July to talk about diseases. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us and we'll get you the best information we can or information. And otherwise, have a great day.